also SSH over Tor. It provides a SOCKS proxy. And we also ship an HTTP proxy, so you can do lots of stuff. So you could, for example, configure your chat client. Does anybody here use Pigeon? Yeah, okay. You can configure Pigeon to talk over Tor. And if you do that, it means that people that are watching your local network connection, they won't see your instant messages anymore, right? And the instant messaging server, they won't know you're in Jordan. So like in China, for example, sometimes chat programs just stop working mysteriously. Well, if you have an anonymity network and you route your chat program over the anonymity network and it works, maybe you need a bridge in China, but if you're able to do that, it means that they don't know that you are chatting anymore. They have no idea about that. And while Tor does have some latency issues, like sometimes sending a message like to request a web page is sometimes slow. While we're working on increasing performance, at the end of the day, for something like instant messaging, half a second of latency sometimes is not noticeable. You send a message, and the message goes, and someone has to think about a response anyway. And half a second of latency is not usually something that you're going to notice right away, if at all. So using Tor is as simple as using any other proxy. But we try not to dumb it down. We don't want to say, just use it and be secure, because there are risks. And the risks are that if you do it wrong, you might reveal information about yourself. And in some places, that could be like a life-threatening situation. So, any more here? Yeah?
Can you talk a little about code bootstrap?
Yeah, you want me to talk about that? Well, let's finish the Tor questions first. And then, yeah. So, are there any more questions about Tor at all? Yeah?
So you're saying like there's no any chance to the information to be traceable?
Well, there is a chance for the information in Tor to be traced. It's traced to the last server in the circuit. So if I have a Tor server in America, and that's the last one you exit through, and you connect to Amazon.com, they see it as my computer.
But not from A to Z?
That is correct. So the idea is that you can cover your tracks online. You get to give away as much as you have chosen to reveal. Isn't that, you like that property? I guess you do, right? You're also wearing pants, I noticed?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Glad to see that, by the way. It'd be a very strange welcome otherwise. Yes?
You said that you just our IP addresses Torah's servers. So we can be localized as a small service so we can access.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I can't hear you.
We said we just our IP addresses Torah's servers, so they know us as servers they can use. My question is, like Jordan, as far as I know, we have dynamic IP addresses. So what does that affect the Tor?
Okay, sure. So the question was, if you want to be a Tor server, what about dynamic IP addresses? And the answer is, most IP addresses change over time. Like most systems have a different IP. Sometimes it'll last for years, but sometimes it'll last for hours. The Tor network will constantly change. So we anticipate this churn, and if you register your IP address, you'll update it. You'll say, oh, my IP address has changed, it's something new. And you report that to the directory authority, and then within a certain amount of time, your IP address has changed. So now it's possible, for example, that if your IP address changes every 5 minutes, you can't be a Tor server. But you can still use it as a Tor client, so that's fine. So, yeah, perfect.
There's a program, a free program for monitoring the changes in the IP.
Tor automatically detects if its IP address changes.
Yeah, I mean, I need to be a server.
Yeah, if you need to be a server, Tor automatically detects your IP address changes. You don't need to run any software other than Tor if you want to be a Tor server. We just take care of it. Yep.
About the dynamic IP addresses, can't we like automatically telling the Tor server that it's changing?
Hmm?
So we don't have to, like, for every 5 minutes, as you said, to tell you that the IP is changing.
Correct. If you have an IP address on your internet connection, and you have a port that is reachable by the general internet, if someone can connect to you, you will notice when your IP address changes. You check in, essentially, And when you notice your IP address changes, you will publish a new server descriptor saying your new IP address. So if you have a dynamic IP and you want to be a Tor server, it's fine. My recommendation, by the way, if you're going to run a Tor server here in Jordan, is that you run one. No question. But you don't allow exiting from your server to anywhere on the internet, except maybe to port 80 or port 443, for two reasons. One, it will allow researchers to use the Tor network to test firewalls of Jordan, to see which websites are visible, for example, to get blocked pages. I'd like to see the Jordanian block page. Tor's website is not blocked, surprisingly, here. It is in Lebanon with Ojero. It is in Qatar. It was not in Egypt. But when I went to the airport, every website was blocked, which was weird. Like Google was blocked. Which was, I think that they just don't know how, like the person just set up the network and like blocked everything. And they're like, let's create a mini Burma right in the middle of Amman's airport. But so if you run a Tor server, you probably want to restrict what leaves your Tor server. And the reason is because we think it's really important that the network has geographic diversity, right? If we have 2,000 or 5,000 Tor servers around the world, and they're in 160 countries, wiretapping all of those Tor servers is really, really hard. If there are 2,000 and they're just in America, that's really easy to wiretap, right? Because every connection going into the United States could be monitored by, say, the NSA or another American government agency. So we want to have geographic diversity. So if my first hop through the network goes through Jordan, trail stops there depending on where the person is watching. And I think that's really important too, especially for blocking, because as governments try to block more and more of the Tor network, if the Tor network is big enough, they're going to actually cause issues, because they're going to be blocking like net blocks of entire countries. And so that won't happen. They'll have to take a step back. I believe they'll have to take a step back, because more and more normal, regular people that have nothing to hide at all, that aren't human rights activists, that aren't police officers, that aren't government, right? They will need to use a tool like this just to read about breast cancer, right? And so it's important to run the servers in a sustainable way and to give it geographic diversity. So if I've convinced even one of you, by the way, it's worth it for me to have come here. So, yeah.
There's websites like Google.
Uh-huh.
If you enter from Jordan, you see an Arabic